Hello. Good afternoon to those joining us in Geneva, and good morning to those joining us from Barbados and journalists who are following this press conference from around the world. We are today here from Geneva and from Barbados launching the presenting the Global Supply Chain Forum, which is organized by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development and the Government of Barbados, and which will take place in May in Bridgetown, Barbados. We are joined by the UNCTAD Deputy Secretary General, Mr. Pedro Manuel Moreno, Ambassador Matthew Wilson, Permanent Representative of Barbados to the UN, WTO, and other international organizations here in Geneva, and Ambassador DONNA FORDE in Barbados, Director General of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of the Government of Barbados. Journalists here in the room in Geneva, in Barbados, and online, welcome. We're also joined by Belle Holder, who coordinates a lot of the media and communications for the Global Supply Chain Forum, and who will be co-chairing this press conference with me. Having said that, I would like first from us to share the video that explains the importance of this Global Supply Chain Forum and gives entrance to this press conference. If we can, please share the video with attendance. Thank you.
From the 21st to the 24th of May, in Bridgetown, Barbados, UNCTAD and the Government of Barbados will organize the first UN Global Supply Chain Forum. Transport and logistics are the backbones of globalization. They link global supply chains and deliver global trade. Global supply chains, supported by sustainable and resilient transport and logistics, can foster economic growth, job creation, and poverty reduction. Yet, extreme weather events, geopolitical risks, capacity shortages, high shipping costs, trade tensions, the global pandemic, and the sustainability imperative pose challenges for the sector. Small island developing states are hit the hardest. While a disruption causing a rise in container shipping costs can increase global consumer prices by 1.6%, the surge is 5 times higher for small island developing states. Small island developing states have limited capacity to prepare, respond, and adapt. Other vulnerable economies such as landlocked developing countries face similar challenges that limit their possibilities to integrate global and regional supply chains. It's time to change that narrative. At the forum, policymakers, industry leaders, and practitioners will discuss innovative solutions to tackle transport and logistics challenges and harness opportunities for sustainable, inclusive, and resilient supply chains. How? Through innovative solutions, international collaboration, public-private partnerships, and sharing of best practices. Global supply chains help deliver not only goods globally, but also the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Ready to embark on this journey? Join us at the UNCTAD Global Supply Chain Forum.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the Deputy Secretary General of UNCTAD, Mr. Pedro Manuel Moreno. The floor is yours, Deputy.
Thank you, Amalia. Welcome, everybody. Your Excellency and very dear friend, Matthew Wilson, Ambassador of Barbados to the United Nations in Geneva, Ambassador DONNA FORDE, Director General of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Barbados, joining us online. Dear friends there in Barbados too, I see Carlos over there and Belle. Thank you also for joining us today. Dear members of the media, ladies, gentlemen, dear friends, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the press briefing for the first UNCTAD Global Supply Chain Forum that will be held in Barbados this year. We are organizing this forum to deal with an issue that affects us all: how to foster resilient and sustainable global supply chains. Global supply chains have been experiencing major disruptions, and new challenges keep arising. The COVID-19 pandemic was an unprecedented shock to supply chains, triggering a steep decline in trade and shortages of essential goods. Thanks to an enormous effort on trade facilitation, including many digital solutions, ports could remain open and trade could be moving. However, in some developing countries, access to and know-how on digital solutions are a challenge. On top of this, recent geopolitical tensions have disrupted major trade routes, such as those in the Black Sea, and more recently, the Red Sea. And then there is climate change, taking a heavy toll on trade routes. For example, the Panama Canal is facing issues of water scarcity in the wake of the climate crisis. The biggest challenge for maritime transport for the coming decades is the energy transition. Shipping must decarbonize, and this is costly. Decarbonizing the world's fleet by 2050 could cost between $8 to $28 billion annually. Small island developing states, including Barbados, are particularly affected by these challenges. They depend heavily on maritime transport, but have fewer resources to mitigate and adapt. Also, higher shipping costs affect these countries disproportionately. These countries then require support, and the international community knows it. This forum then aims precisely at finding sustainable solutions to these challenges and identify opportunities. The good news is that many practical solutions already exist to facilitate trade. Modernize ports, adapt transport infrastructure, and build resilience in maritime transport. But a big challenge is funding, and currently, funding gaps are big. And this is something that the Government of Barbados, through the Prime Minister Motley, has been advocating for in many international fora. We have been collaborating with the International Maritime Organization on understanding how economic measures, such as levy, could support developing countries and especially SIDS. To address capacity gaps, UNCTAD has supported countries with technical cooperation programs on customs automation, port reforms, trade facilitation, e-commerce, and maritime transport. We should also keep in mind that the energy transition will bring new opportunities. Some countries may become providers or hubs of alternative fuels. To help find new solutions on making global production and distribution networks greener and more efficient and resilient, we have launched a Supply Chain Innovation Challenge, whose winner will be presented at the forum. Ladies and gentlemen, the Global Supply Chain Forum in Barbados offers a platform to discuss the multifaceted challenges of global supply chains and identify concrete actions to improve their functioning and sustainability. This requires dialogue, engagement, and collaborations of all critical partners along supply chains, including member states, governmental bodies, the private sector, and international organizations. We are very pleased that the forum counts with key partners in global supply chains. We have already more than 100 partners confirmed, and we can count, already confirmed, on the participation of the heads of IMO, CARICOM, ILO, UNIDO, the Association of Caribbean States, and the Global Maritime Forum, just to name a few. And importantly, ministers of transports will deliberate on a ministerial declaration which can then feed into the 4th International Conference on Small Island Developing States in Antigua and Barbuda, also this year. Before handing back to the moderator, I want to thank the Honourable Minister Simons and the Government of Barbados and all the team represented in this press briefing, represented here in Geneva by Ambassador Wilson, for hosting the forum and collaborating with us in organizing this important event, and for being one of our main partners and advocates of UNCTAD and the work we do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your words to the UNCTAD Deputy Secretary General. I now give the floor to Ambassador Matthew Wilson, Permanent Representative of Barbados to the UN, WTO, and other international organizations in Geneva. Please, Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Amalia, and thank you, Deputy Secretary General, my dear friend Pedro, and a warm welcome to my colleagues in Culloden Road in Barbados, in particular Director General FORDE. It's a pleasure to speak to international journalists and the Bajan journalists in beautiful Barbados today. As many of you know, Barbados became the first small island developing state to host a global UNCTAD conference when we served the host of UNCTAD 15. Unfortunately, that was held in the middle of the pandemic, and although we were not able to get together in person the way we anticipated, the meeting had a number of fundamental outcomes and recommendations, and one of these key recommendations, as reflected in the Bridgetown Covenant, was that we needed to place a spotlight on supply chains, and importantly, where they were simply not working effectively. Another major call from UNCTAD 15 was that we needed to see UNCTAD as an organization do more for small island developing states in a comprehensive, clear, and concise way. This is why we very much welcome that UNCTAD is in the process of establishing a dedicated SIDS program and platform, including a trust fund. This has been a concrete outcome of Barbados' advocacy and influence, and I send warm regards to Secretary General Rebecca Greenspan for very much being a great pilot of this initiative. So these two priorities, addressing global supply chains and focusing on small island states, have come together beautifully in this forum. The facts are clear. Small countries do not control the supply chains, and we are the most vulnerable to many of the issues that actually disrupt supply chains. Unpredictable climate, lack of production capacity, high indebtedness, small remote markets, lack of modern infrastructure and processes, including at ports, and often very limited influence on those who are the main influencers of the supply chains, large governments and businesses. The reality is that we're often price takers, product takers, and policy takers. This places us in incredibly vulnerable situations. We saw this during COVID, when we were often at the back of the line to get vaccines or PPPs. And we see this when there are disruptions to routes, as we've seen in the Red Sea and the Panama Canal. As prices of our imported goods immediately go up, fuel prices go up, animal feed prices go up, and the situation in the Red Sea is getting worse. So the idea of having this forum, which came directly from Prime Minister Motley, has foreshadowed where we are today in a state of heightened vulnerability. Again, with threats of nearshoring because of the increased risks and costs of shipping, it will be small and remote island economies, LDCs, and other vulnerable countries which will suffer. Supply chains today barely extend to us now. Shorter chains may cut us off completely. And this also affects our ability to invest in climate change adaptation, as sometimes we simply cannot access the new technology and inputs that we need to truly invest in the circular economy. We need fairness. And to do this, we need advocacy. And we need pathways to solutions that bring all actors to the table. The Global Supply Chain Forum provides a platform for this advocacy and for solutions. SIDS, including Barbados, can tell their story, we can educate, and we can elaborate. Transport ministers can address how new rules and regulations around decarbonization needs to work for small economies. Port authorities can highlight what kinds of partnerships are needed to help them truly facilitate trade. Agriculture representatives can pitch for why food security relies on predictable and cost-effective supply chains that allow both for smooth importation and exportation. And trade officials can highlight why trade rules are effective for healthy supply chains. But this forum has to be more than just lamenting concerns. The focus has to be about finding solutions and scalable and workable solutions. This is why I'm so excited about the kinds of partners that we will have in Barbados, experts in the field who want to find a way to make supply chains work for SIDS and other vulnerable countries. Now, we will not solve all of our problems in May in Barbados, but we will go a long way in spotlighting what we need, where we need to go, and how we may be able to get there through partnerships and shared advocacy, and through this incredible relationship and collaboration with UNCTAD and the United Nations family. Thank you, Amelia.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Matthew Wilson. We would like now to give the floor to Barbados, to Ambassador Donna Forde, Director General of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade in the Government of Barbados. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. Mr. Pedro Manuel Moreno, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Conference on Trade and Development. My friend, brother, Matthew, Ambassador Wilson, Permanent Representative of Barbados to the United Nations, the WTO and other international organizations in Geneva. Ms. Shamika Siriman, Director, UNCTAD, the Technology and Logistics Division. Mr. Jan Hoffman, Head of the Logistics Section. Representatives of the media in Barbados with us and globally. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Donna Forde, Director General of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. And let me start by apologizing for the absence of Honorable Kerry Simmons, the Senior Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. Here in Barbados, the national budget is currently being debated in Parliament. And so Senior Minister is attending to his parliamentary responsibilities. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade to the media launch of the Global Supply Chain Forum under the theme Transport, Logistics, Trade Facilitation for Trade-Driven Development, which will be held here in Barbados at the Lloyd Erskine Sandyford Center, 21st to the 24th of May, 2024. We are pleased to have reached today's milestone and to launch the Global Supply Chain Forum with UNCTAD. This is the first time that UNCTAD will be organizing a high-level forum dedicated to global supply chains, and we are honored that it will be Barbados hosting the first event, and that which we understand will become one of the UNCTAD flagship gatherings going forward. The Government of Barbados is indeed delighted to host the forum, which is a direct response to a request from Prime Minister the Honorable Mia Amor Motley in her capacity as President and presiding chairperson of UNCTAD 15. Some may recall that Barbados was, as Matthew pointed out, the first small island developing state to host UNCTAD's quadrennial conference. And it was during that event that the Prime Minister had asked Secretary General Greenspan to pay attention to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the climate crisis on the cost of shipping and logistics. On that occasion, Prime Minister Motley was concerned that disruptions to supply chains would increase the cost of doing business, negatively affect access to essential goods and lead to increased prices for consumers. We are grateful that the Secretary General and UNCTAD heeded Prime Minister's visionary and timely call to pay attention to this very important matter of global supply chains. That this particular event forms part of UNCTAD's 60th birthday celebrations in 2024 makes it even more special. Global supply chains are fundamental to the smooth operation of international trade and commerce. Air and maritime transportation, port management, logistics, courier services, and warehousing all form part of global supply chains, and a breakdown or disruption to any link or node can affect all others on the chain. Small island developing states are dependent on international trade for economic and sustainable development, given their limited resource endowments. SIDS are heavily reliant on supply chains to ensure businesses and citizens have access to the required goods and services. Whether we are talking about exports or access to inputs from manufacturing, agriculture, tourism, energy consumption, access to food and other essential goods, medicines and other medical supplies, construction materials and equipment, access to stationery and sporting goods. We depend on supply chains for every facet of our daily lives. We believe that the Global Supply Chain Forum is being hosted at an important point in history. Supply chains have still not fully recovered from the disruptions experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic. And, as we see from the news, they are further exacerbated due to the conflict and geopolitical tensions in the Black Sea and the Red Sea, accidents in the Suez Canal, as well as the climate crisis in the case of the Panama Canal. Maritime transportation accounts for around 80% of international trade, and disruptions to that sector will undermine the economic recovery achieved thus far in the post-pandemic period. UNCTAD recently published a report highlighting the impact of these disruptions, including the reduction in container transits and a significant rise in container freight rates by as much as $500. They have also advised that these disruptions can result in delayed deliveries, higher costs, and could negatively affect access to energy products, as well as the food security of developing countries. UNCTAD's July 2022 statistics reveal that the impact of the supply chain crisis led to significantly higher consumer prices for SIDS relative to world prices. And for SIDS, increases of import and consumer prices stood at 26.7% and 8.1% respectively, as compared to corresponding price increases for the world, which stood at only 11.9% and 1.6%. These statistics are worrisome for SIDS, and by extension, all developing countries, given the potential inflationary effects these disruptions could cause. While multinational companies have scale and global reach to minimize the impact these disruptions may cause, many micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises in SIDS do not have such capacity to confront these inflationary pressures. Therefore, if not managed properly, this confluence of disruptions could directly influence our ability to sustain economic growth, maintain our standards of living, and achieve our sustainable development goals. As an island state, Barbados is also concerned about the impact of the climate crisis on our port infrastructure. And under the Bridgetown initiative, we have been calling for the international finance community to create the appropriate conditions to enable small island developing states to access the necessary capital to protect and, where necessary, rebuild our port and trade-related infrastructure. We are therefore pleased that the Global Supply Chain Forum will pay particular attention to the issue of unlocking sustainable financing in respect of innovations for global supply chains. For the Government of Barbados, improving how we facilitate international trade and commerce at our borders is a key objective. Barbados remains committed to the implementation of the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement and is continuously seeking to improve and modernize the conduct of business at our ports of entry. For instance, Barbados has updated its Asicuda platform and, with the help of UNCTAD, is in the process of establishing an electronic single window to further reduce the length of time taken to process cargo-related documentation. We are pleased that UNCTAD and the WTO will host dedicated sessions specifically for representatives of national trade facilitation committees to inter alia provide updates, share experiences, and explore avenues for improved cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, I must reiterate our government's satisfaction that UNCTAD, as the main UN body responsible for trade and development, will host this first Global Supply Chain Forum here in Barbados. This is a recognition that while trade and development is a global issue, there must be space to protect the most vulnerable and those of us dependent on international trade for development. We look forward to welcoming ministers, senior officials, as well as representatives from international organizations, private sector, academia, and civil society to our shores to collectively take part in this important global event and to enjoy the hospitality that our beautiful island offers. The agenda of the forum covers a wide range of topics related to global supply chains that are of importance to us, including maritime decarbonization and implications for fishing vessels, unlocking sustainable financing, innovations for global supply chains, digital solutions for supply chains, leading the way to sustainable ports through energy transition, implementing blockchain technology in global supply chains, climate change adaptation, resilience building, and disaster risk reduction for ports, the nexus between transportation, energy, and food security, and efficient and competitive port management. UNCTAD will also convene a high-level SIDS Transport Ministerial Roundtable on global supply chains, where transport ministers from a number of small island developing states will be given the opportunity to engage in dialogue on the impact of supply chain disruptions on SIDS. We anticipate that the outcome of the forum will include a declaration or statement that sets out the nature of the problems affecting global supply chains, the key solutions to addressing current challenges, and the role of UNCTAD and by extension the UN system in addressing the development challenges associated with global supply chains. The timing of the forum is also helpful from the perspective that it immediately precedes the 4th International SIDS Conference, and the outputs of the forum should support the deliberations that will take place at that conference in Antigua and Barbuda. In closing, permit me to publicly thank the UNCTAD Secretary General and the staff of UNCTAD for the efforts being put into the hosting of the Global Supply Chain Conference, and more generally, for their ongoing support to SIDS and to Barbados. We believe that your efforts post UNCTAD 15 and that your efforts for UNCTAD 15 and indeed for this forum are consistent with the implementation of the Bridgetown Covenant and the spirit of Speightstown. I would also wish to place on record our especial gratitude to some of our key partners who agreed to either support or participate in the forum, including the World Trade Organization, the United Nations Resident Coordinator, and other United Nations agencies covering Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, the Inter-American Development Bank, the Caribbean Development Bank, the International Maritime Organization, the Caribbean Export Development Agency, the Caribbean Community, UNIDO, ILO, the Association of Caribbean States, the Andean Development Fund, CAF, the CARICOM Private Sector Organization, and Export Barbados. Finally, I wish to thank our colleagues from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, including Matthew in Geneva, Carlos and Kay in Barbados, Deidre and Jackie, and from the National Implementation Unit, of course, Belle, for her efforts, for arranging this launch, and for the continued efforts towards the successful hosting of the Global Supply Chain Forum. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Donna Forde from Barbados. We will now like to open up the press conference to questions from the media, both in Barbados, online, and here in Geneva. And I would like to give the floor to coordinate to my colleague, Belle Holder in Barbados. Thank you, Belle.
Thank you, Amalia. We can take a question from the floor in Geneva, if you have anyone there who's ready to ask a question.
No, we think Barbados should go first. So happy to yield the floor to you and to colleagues in Barbados.
Thank you. And as Amalia said, we've opened the floor to our journalists in Barbados. Do you have any questions? And your questions can be posed to any of the speakers from this morning. But also we do have Mr. Carlos Wharton here, who is the national coordinator with the National Implementation Unit. And online in Geneva, we also have Jan Hoffman and you guys who are dealing with the logistics of the Global Supply Chain Forum. So your questions are open to those individuals as well.
That at least one partners have.
Sorry, can you identify your name, your media house, and speak a little louder, please?
Vanessa Henry, CBC. It was partners have confirmed their attendance. There are going to be 100 people coming here, or is it groups made up of different representatives? Like, how many persons can we expect to see?
So in terms of attendees, Mr. Wharton, would you like to take that question? So the question being asked, so that our colleagues in Geneva can hear the question, we had Anesta Henry from the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, which is our national broadcaster. And the question she is asking is, how many persons can we expect here in Barbados for the Global Supply Chain Forum? I think she's also asking both from a participation in terms of speakers and also the attendees. Mr. Wharton?
Hi, thanks for the question. So to date, we have over 300 persons registered. In terms of speakers identified, the number is around 96 persons, and that's not excluding persons like the Prime Minister or other ministers that would have been invited to participate. We also have a number of international organizations that have confirmed, and the numbers that I'm seeing is about 12 heads of international organizations slated to attend the meeting at some point in time. So confirmed, I can say around definitely over 100 in terms of speakers identified and so on. And in terms of registrants, we have over 300 already in the system. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Wharton. Any other questions from the floor here in Barbados?
Corporal Monty from Nation News. In terms of being solution oriented, I'm trying to grasp like what is the hope that we hope to achieve in terms of a solution going forward, because these issues that we are tackling as it relates to supply chain to some degree are pretty much cast in stone. I mean, the economies of scale remain the same, regardless of what climate issues in the Suez Canal are still static. The war within the Middle East, what exactly are we hoping to try to achieve in terms of an actual solution for such these major issues?
You know, in this business, the solutions aren't easily obtained. It's a long slog, one step at a time you have to take to be able to achieve any success in trade and development space. The major important milestone is the fact that UNCTAD is taking the time and the attention to focus on global supply chains. UNCTAD is a dedicated UN body responsible for trade and development, and it's absolutely critical that at the core of the system, the United Nations has a say on how global supply chains are to operate. So from my perspective, the success of this forum is the fact that it's actually being held. We understand that other developing countries are interested in holding follow-up forums because of the recognition of the direct impact such disruptions have on social and or economic development. So in the near future, I don't expect any miraculous solution, but what I do expect is that UNCTAD will continue to take on board the views of smaller and developing states. And first, the Fourth International CIS Conference, which timestamp-wise is an extremely important occasion for CIS, but more importantly thereafter, that these issues affecting global supply chains, and specifically CIS in that regard, are constantly dealt with within the organs of UNCTAD, including the Trade and Development Board. So I know it's not a sexy topic for media house people, but ultimately it is essential that these topics remain on the global agenda to make sure that we do get the food that is required to eat and that we have the necessary equipment and tools to do our business.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Wharton. We can also take questions from our online attendees. If you have any journalists and media online who can raise their hand and ask a question as well. Coming back to Anesta from CBC.
Have you been chosen
Venue?
Yes, please.
Oh, sorry, Lloyd Erskine Sanford Center is the venue.
And in terms of accommodations that we have on the plans in.
Well, we've been collaborating with the BHTA, and what we do know is that UNCTAD has a select set of hotels that they will be working directly with. But then there's also another, catchment of hotels that have been identified as recommended places of stay.
The impact of the global supply chain disruption on inflation rates for SIDS and for developed countries. Are we doing work specifically to gather the impact for leaders in terms of inflation rates? How do we compare to 6% that was given average?
I don't have the Barbados data. The only data I had was the UNCTAD data, and it's scary. So you're talking about rates for SIDS that are significantly higher than for developing countries or for the rest of the world. And this is because size matters in this context. We don't have scale to produce on our own. And therefore, no matter what we do, whether it's on the importing side of the equation or the exporting side of the equation, we rely on international shipping, for instance, to get access to the resources to produce the good or to sell the good. And therefore, dependence on international trade is real for smaller than developing states. And it's no cliche when we say we're small and open. It's because our imports plus exports equals a significant amount of GDP. That means everything that you do is required, depends on trade to happen. So this is why for us it's important. We're extremely happy that the United Nations has taken the time and the resources to focus on the things. And we do look forward to welcoming the Secretary General and her team here to Barbados for the event.
And if we can also, thank you so much, Mr. Warden. And if we can also come to Geneva and connect with Ambassador Matthew Wilson, can you weigh in on that particular topic and go in terms of add to what Mr. Wharton is saying?
Thank you, Belle, and thank you to the journalists back home. No, I really want to reiterate what he said. The whole idea of advocacy is already an important outcome of this. For the past 5 or 6 months, we've been talking about this. We've been able to retail what our problems are, what our issues are. People are listening. There's incredible amount of interest in the private sector, in international organizations, in academia, to come to Barbados to discuss these issues. So already for me, for us up here, this is a big win, because we're putting something on the agenda that would not naturally be on the agenda, the priorities and the concerns of small island developing states. The international system is an interesting one. It is one seat, one country, one vote, but often small island developing states have to fight for that seat. We have to fight to have a voice. And this forum is giving us a direct voice. SIDS and other vulnerable countries and LDCs, this is giving us an opportunity to tell our story, to tell what it is we went through during COVID, to tell what it is we're going through right now because of the geopolitical problems that we're seeing in the Red Sea, the issues with climate change that are affecting the Panama Canal. This gives us an opportunity, a platform to talk about these things. But I agree with you that the solutions are not going to be immediate. So this is not about transforming supply chains immediately, but this does give us an opportunity to look at what new supply chains could be in our own region. Because when you look at food insecurity and the fact that a lot of the food that we import in Barbados and the rest of the region actually comes from outside of the region, this is an opportunity to pivot. This is an opportunity to really invest in our own regional supply chains and to make sure that we feed ourselves. You have to remember the 20 by 25 that CARICOM has, that by 2025, we should be able to have a certain amount of an ability to feed ourselves, to have a strength in our agriculture sector. So it's also about looking at how can we look at the region itself and be able to meet our own needs from our own neighbors under the CARICOM single market and economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And we are going to connect with Geneva online. Jan Hoffman, who is handling logistics for the Global Supply Chain Forum, wanted to follow up on one of the questions that were asked here in the room. Mr. Hoffman?
Yes, thank you very much. On the two last questions, which actually go very well together, and Carlos and Matthew answered very correctly, about the impact and how different groups, including SIDS, are particularly strongly impacted. In fact, just last Friday, we launched a revised, updated liner shipping connectivity index, hard UNCTAD data on shipping supply. We are also this month launching a new data set on transport costs, and because it's UNCTAD data, I already have the data, and I can share with you that SIDS effectively pay about 70% more than typical other country groups for the transport of their imports, which is confirmed again by our latest hard data on transport costs. Landlocked countries also pay more for different reasons. The shipping connectivity, which overall, over the last 2 decades where we have the hard data, has been improving for most countries, but not for most SIDS. So this then leads to the previous question about solutions. And I'm fully with Carlos and colleagues here. It is also about raising the awareness issues, being happy and proud and thanking Barbados for hosting this and nudging us into doing this first Global Supply Chain Forum, which then it's, on the higher level leads to input into the SIDS 4 conference in Antigua and Barbuda 1 week later, but also the landlord country conference in Rwanda the months thereafter. And we are so proud. We have more than 100 partners joining. Apart from the numbers of participants, we said we have the who is who in supply chains, and raising the level is one important thing. But actually, when I go through the more than 50 specific technical sessions, we will have key stakeholders working together on competition issues, on digitalization, on decarbonization. As Pedro said, the main challenge for the future of the industry is the energy transition. And we will have these stakeholders together to work together to ensure an equitable transition. We will have sessions with different partners, technology, single window, green ports, port resilience, customs automation. I mean, there's a long list of actually quite concrete outcomes where we also bring a number of projects with partners, World Bank, IMO, different private sector, UNCTAD, several projects come there. And so beyond this, which may be more difficult to transmit to journalists, to the audience, like we raise the level awareness of this more and more important topic after COVID, Red Sea, Black Sea, the climate change, all these issues. But it's actually, we actually expect quite a few concrete outcomes. So please join us for raising the level and having concrete outcomes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. And I see there's a hand raised online, Jilly Wright. If you can give the floor to Jilly Wright, who is a journalist attending online.
Hi there. Yes, Jilly Wright from Global Finance magazine. I'd just like to ask what efforts are being made to address multilateral financial institution financing design flaws. Do you think, for example, that switching financing tied to gross national income to a more multi-dimensional vulnerability index would perhaps benefit the development of SIDS ports and logistical infrastructure?
All right, and who will be tackling the answer to that question, to Jilly's question, please? Global Finance Magazine. Can we have a response to Jilly Wright's question from Global Finance Magazine?
Thank you, Belle. Just a few comments on my side before I hand over to Jan and then maybe back to Barbados. It's a very, very important question because one of the issues that many small island development states have faced throughout our development trajectory has been accessing the finance that we need from the international financial institutions. And this is at the very core of the Bridgetown initiative, which says we need to look at the financial ecosystem to see, is it really fit for purpose? Is it really working for those who need the finance the most? GDP per capita is not an appropriate mechanism to use to allow countries to access or not to access financing. So this is why the multi-vulnerability index is a very interesting construct. I mean, it's something that we have been working with other CARICOM states and Pacific states for many, many years now. And, but the devil is in the detail. We have to see exactly what this multi-dimensional vulnerability index would look like, exactly how it works, because the worst thing that could happen is that we invest in a new tool that doesn't do what we need it to do. And what we need it to do is to be able to allow small countries like us to be able to access resources, especially grant resources from the international financial institutions. We also need to look at issues around risk, and this is with commercial banks as well. We need to de-risk investments in small and medium-sized enterprises and in projects in small island developing states. And part of that is about educating the banking system in small island developing states, and about looking at issues around collateral, looking at issues around cooperatives. So it is a huge value chain of issues I think we have to look at here. But you're completely correct in that one of the things that does have to change is the mechanisms for small developing states being able to access or not access the resources that we need, especially for climate change, the circular economy, and adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Wilson. And we're coming now to a text question from an independent journalist online who's asking the question, apart from the recently announced ferry service between Guyana, Suriname, Trinidad, and Barbados, is CARICOM discussing other regional opportunities for transportation to lessen the dependence on the global supply chain? And can I come to Ambassador Forde? Should I repeat? I'm going to repeat the question. So the question is, apart from the recently announced ferry service between Guyana, Suriname, Trinidad, and Barbados, is CARICOM discussing other regional opportunities for transportation to lessen the dependence on the global supply chain?
Well, I can answer briefly that coming out of the CARICOM Heads of Government Conference, I could just answer very briefly that regional transportation continues to be not only a challenge, but a priority for CARICOM governments. And they're continuing to work on solutions for the challenges that we have. We know that we know of the concerns with LIAT, and we know that a new venture is about to come on stream anytime. I must confess I don't have specifics, but I know that the regional transport challenges continue to receive the attention of heads of government. And Carlos, you may have additional.
What I wish to say is that for the forum, we have received significant interest from the CARICOM private sector organization, as well as the Caribbean Development Bank, in having specific sessions that will look at regional connectivity, as well as the impact of regional connectivity and food security. So as part of this forum, we're getting direct requests from the private sector and from the development institutions that we focus on these topics. So we're happy that numerous sessions will be held on transportation generally and food security as well.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wharton. And if we have no more questions, you have a question? Sorry, from the nation, go ahead.
Yes, just one more question. I know that UNCTAD 15, which was hosted in Barbados, that's a different forum, obviously, from what is coming up on the supply chain and on a forum that hosted. However, could you point to any follow-up action from that last forum that could assure the public and globally and locally that the issue of implementation deficit would not necessarily factor so much in this upcoming book?
So sum up the question before you answer the question for the benefit of our colleagues in Geneva, please.
No, I understand the question. What's the main follow-up things that we could point to post-COVID-15, post-UNCTAD 15 that we're proud of? And Ambassador mentioned it in his speech upfront, where he recalled the efforts that UNCTAD has taken post-UNCTAD 15 to support small island developing states. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, in very close collaboration with the CARICOM Secretariat, been working assiduously on the preparation of a concept paper that elaborated the whole idea of how UNCTAD should be able or should be providing support to SIDS consistent with the Bridgetown Covenant. This concept paper morphed over the months into what is now being styled the UNCTAD strategy to support small island developing states. Since that time, there's also been discussions in Geneva around how then do we transform this strategy now into a bankable, set of projects that would directly help SIDS. And in that regard, I know Ambassador is working really hard in establishing a trust fund within UNCTAD to ensure that the resources are there to back up the strategy that has been so eloquently developed by the UNCTAD Secretariat. So for me, that is a huge win, because in the past, you had different pockets of funds and options and possibilities of assistance. Now I can rest assured knowing that at least over the next 3 to 4 years that there is a strategy and that there will be resources to help UNCTAD implement what they wish to do on behalf of SIDS. So I'm a lot more comfortable in that regard post UNCTAD 15.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Wharton. Thank you for your question. I want to say thank you so much to all of the journalists here in the room in Barbados, those online, as well as those in Geneva. I'm going to take this opportunity now to hand back to Amalia Navarro in Geneva.
Thank you very much, Belle. In closing this press conference, let me just say that all the information regarding the Global Supply Chain Forum is available on UNCTAD.org, on our website, and on the dedicated website of the Supply Chain Forum itself. The importance of the issue has been very recently highlighted by UNCTAD in a recent report called Navigating Troubled Waters on the impact on global trade of supply chain disruptions in the Red Sea, in the Black Sea, and the Panama Canal. And we will be making available the latest data, as Jan has mentioned. A press release will be made available to media at the end of this press conference, as will the video presenting the Global Supply Chain Forum, and both teams in Geneva and in Barbados are ready to support media as needed. So in closing, let me just again thank the Deputy Secretary General of UNCTAD, the Ambassador Matthew Wilson, and Ambassador DONNA FORDE, and teams in Barbados and Geneva. Thank you very much, and we finalize here. Thank you.